Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HBR Minute HCI podcast episode, I explore the recent HBR video, Disruptive Innovation Explained. Welcome back to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. It's great to be with you again today for this HBR Minute HCI podcast episode. Today I'll be exploring the HBR video, Disruptive Innovation Explained. Clay Christensen, Harvard Business School professor and the world's most influential management guru, according to Thinkers 50, lays out his landmark theory. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you on the flip side of this first clip.
Hello, I'm Des Dearlove. Welcome to The Idea. My guest today is Professor Clayton Christensen. Clay, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Des.
What exactly is disruptive innovation? Explain it.
A disruptive innovation is not a breakthrough innovation that makes good products a lot better. But it has a very specific definition, and that is it transforms a product that historically was so expensive and complicated that only a few people with a lot of money and a lot of skill had access to it. A disruptive innovation makes it so much more affordable and accessible that a much larger population have access to it.
So give us an example of this. I mean, most people are familiar with the computer industry and how that's developed. Perhaps you can use that as an example.
Yeah, so at the beginning, the first manifestation of digital technology was a mainframe computer. It cost several $1 million to buy, and it took years to be trained to operate these things. And so that meant that the largest corporations and the largest universities could have one, And so we had to take our problem to the center where the experts solved it for us. But then there's a sequence of innovations from the mainframe to a mini, to a desktop, to a laptop, and now to a smartphone that has democratized technology to the point that everybody has access to it around the world. And we are much better off. It was very hard, though, for the pioneers of the industry to catch these new waves. Most of those were created and dominated by new companies.
So I think it's important to really establish, as we get started talking about this video, that the theory of disruptive innovation, as laid out by Clay Christensen, and which he'll describe in this video, is different than what we commonly talk about in terms of disruptive technologies. Now, there is some overlap, but I hear people talking about disruptive technologies. In fact, I probably do it as well, much more broadly outside of the definition from what Clay Christensen actually meant when he was writing up this theory and as it's gained traction over the years. So in this video, we're going to zoom in and a little bit more precisely define what disruptive innovation is. Now, later, we can talk a little bit about what that means for this broader discussion of disruptive technologies and the future of work. But it's very important to just understand the basic premise of the general theory and how that can inform the way we look at the world and prepare for the future. So the idea of disruptive innovation is that we're going to make something more accessible and available for lower cost with vastly improved service to the masses. That we can bring a technology that previously was only for the elite, for the select few, in part due to cost, but in part due to complicated processes and difficulty for usage, now everyone can use it. And as we think back throughout history, we can think of many of these types of disruptive innovations that have completely upended markets and shifted the way we think about certain types of products and even the nature of work. Sometimes, and I've done this myself on this podcast, sometimes we talk about disruptive technologies more generally and how they fit into the different iterations of the Industrial Revolution. And that's a little bit more of a broad kind of an approach, a little bit different than the more specific definition that Clay is providing with his more specific disruptive innovation theory.
And then you're touching on that this process gives rise to the innovator's dilemma, which was the title of your 1997 book.
Yeah, that's right.
But how do people get around that? I mean, that dilemma, can you explain the dilemma itself to us?
Yeah, so the dilemma is in every company, every day, every year, people are going into senior management, knocking on the door saying, I got a new product for us. And some of those entail making better products that you could sell for higher prices to your best customers. A disruptive innovation generally has to cause you to go after new markets, people who aren't your customers. And the product that you want to sell them is something that is just so much more affordable and simple that your current customers can't buy it, you know. And so the choice that you have to make is, should we make better products that we could sell for better profits to our best customers? Or maybe we ought to make worse products that none of our customers would buy that would ruin our margins. What should we do? And that really is the dilemma. It was the dilemma that General Motors and Ford faced when they tried to decide, should we go down and compete against Toyota, who came in at the bottom? Or should we make even bigger SUVs for even bigger people? And now Toyota has the same problem. As the Koreans in Hyundai and Kia have really won the low end of the market from Toyota. And it's not because Toyota's asleep at the switch. But why would they ever invest to defend the lowest profit part of their market, which is the subcompacts, when they have the privilege of competing against Mercedes? You know, and then Chery is coming from China, doing the same thing to the Koreans.
In this clip, he talked more specifically about the innovator's dilemma. So if we think about disruptive innovation and what drives it, what we see most often is that you have outsiders in the industry. You have new startups, you have new innovators that come on the scene, make a splash, and they introduce a new product or service to the market that is a disruptive innovation. It completely upends the way things were done before because it provides more accessibility of, a certain technology to the masses for much cheaper. The innovator's dilemma comes about because an established company with market share who has loyal customers and they can sell expensive products to those customers, they're incentivized to come up with upgrades to those expensive projects to increase their margins. They are not incentivized to provide cheaper, more accessible, user-friendly products for much lower margins. Because of that disincentive, you have the innovator's dilemma, and some of the most innovative companies, the largest companies, they tend to not be the ones to come up with these new disruptive innovations. It's usually, again, these outside startups that come in and they disrupt the space. The interesting thing is it doesn't need to be that way. If organizations and leaders can think about the market a little bit differently, and if you can think about your competition a little bit differently, you can embrace moving down towards the bottom and reaching more customers in new markets for lower margins, but providing tremendous value through really great technologies. That's what many of these disruptors do. And if these large organizations want to maintain market share and they want to maintain relevance, once these new disruptive innovations come about, they have to play that game. They have to be part of that process. And it's just simply not the way that large organizations often work.
So one of the things I really like about your ideas is that they really do have had an impact out there. I mean, some of this thinking has, without question, influenced a whole generation of managers, including people like Steve Jobs. You're referenced in the biography that he read the book and was very influenced by the book, and possibly Apple I and Apple II are, him resolving the innovator's dilemma.
Yeah.
But also Andy Grove at Intel. You had a contact with him.
Yeah. It's I never imagined that I could ever meet these people, let alone be judged as having helped them. But I learned a lot from Andy Grove. So what happened was I was just at HBS minding my own business, and Andy Grove called me just out of the blue and said, "Look, I'm a busy man. I don't have time to read drivel from academics, but somebody told me you had this theory, and I wondered if you could come out and present what you're learning to me and my staff, and then tell us how it applies to Intel." And for me, it was a chance of a lifetime. So I flew out there, and turned out he's quite a gruff man. And he said, stuff's happened to us. We only have 10 minutes for you. So just tell us what it means for Intel. And I said, "Andy, I can't because I have no opinion about Intel, but the theory has an opinion. And so I have to describe the theory." So he sat back impatiently, and 10 minutes into it, he chopped me off and he said, "Look, I got your stupid theory. Tell us what it means for Intel." And he got what he got, and he really did get it, And I said, "Andy, I need 5 more minutes because I got to describe how this process of disruption worked its way through a totally different industry, just so you can visualize what can happen to Intel." So I described how the mini mills came in to the steel market at rebar and then went up market. And when I was done with that, Grove said, "Oh, I get it. So what you're telling me it means for Intel is," and he described how they had 2 companies coming at them from below, and Intel needs to go down and not let them go up against us. And it was very successful.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership: Ordinary, Everyday Actions That Produce Extraordinary Results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. I really like this Intel example. He goes in, this is a young Clay Christensen, years and years ago, decades ago. He goes in to Intel and he describes his theory. And here he has the CEO wanting to know, not really caring about the academic mumbo jumbo, not caring about the theory, just wanting to get to the nitty gritty of application. What does this mean for Intel? And Clay walks him through not what it means for Intel, but what it meant for another industry completely different from the tech industry, and with the hope that that the Intel CEO could learn some lessons and be able to come to some conclusions about what it meant for Intel. A really great process to go through with a client, but also it really speaks to this innovator's dilemma, because Intel was in this space feeling a lot of pressure, and they weren't incentivized to go down to reach a wider, broader customer base with lower margins to address some of these new competitors in the space. That wasn't their inclination, but they felt the pressure. And through Clay's conversation with them, they were able to understand what the innovator's dilemma and what disruptive innovation could mean for Intel if they couldn't pivot and approach their business with that kind of a mindset at the forefront.
If I'd have been suckered into telling Andy Grove what he should do, I'd have been killed, because he knew so much more about microprocessors than I ever would know. But rather than telling him what to think, I taught him how to think. And he could reach his own conclusions. And that changed the way I teach. It changed the way I talk. And the insight is that, for whatever reason, the way they designed the world, data is only available about the past. And when we teach people that they should be data-driven and fact-based and analytical as they look into the future, in many ways we condemn them to take action when the game is over. The only way you can look into the future, there's no data, so you have to have a good theory. And we don't think about it, but every time we're taking an action, it's predicated upon a theory. And so by teaching managers to look through the lens of a theory into the future, you can actually see the future very clearly. And I think that's what the theory of disruption has done.
Clay Christensen, thank you very much for talking to us.
Oh, thanks for taking the time to ask such great questions.
Rather than telling him what to think, he taught him how to think. This is such a powerful concept. Now, this is a little bit disconnected from the main purpose of this video, but this is a really important life lesson for leaders out there, for coaches and consultants out there, for anyone wanting to influence others around them. If you just are the one with the expertise and you come in and you just tell people what to do, that has very limited impact. But if you, rather than telling people what you think, you can walk them through the process, help them to understand theory, help them understand the application, and then teach them how to think so they can come up with the solutions. That is far more powerful. So that's a general, really important lesson that he conveys in this clip, and I've seen that play out in my life, in my professional life, many, many times. And I agree. I think I've been very fortunate because I've taken that approach in certain situations where if I had just come in with my credentials, my expertise, my degrees, and just said, here's what you should do, they might have listened for a little while, but then nothing would have happened. They wouldn't have implemented, they certainly wouldn't have sustained whatever change initiative they were trying to go about doing. But because I was able to help them, walk them through the process, help them through asking guiding questions, help them to think, to learn how to think about the issues in a compelling way so that they could come up with their own solutions, it derived much better outcomes for the organization. A really important lesson we should all learn. Now, coming back to disruptive innovation and the innovator's dilemma, what he was able to do through this process is meet with Andy Grove, CEO of Intel, help him learn how to use this theory, apply it to the Intel situation, and then come up with solutions and action items, a strategy and plan to go about trying to deal with competitors in their space so that they wouldn't just be disrupted by new entrants to the market and new technologies that were cheaper, that would allow more accessibility to the products, to a more mass audience, more a general consumer base. Ultimately, we see this play out throughout the world over and over and over again. Tech is, of course, a hot topic, and we talk about it within the tech space all the time. Certainly, disruptive innovations occur within the tech space often. Certainly in the last couple of decades, we've just seen a proliferation of these types of disruptive technologies. Computing power, processing speed continues to increase exponentially. Cost of storage and memory continues to decrease almost exponentially. And the result is just more access to more people with more powerful products over the years. It's really interesting to think what this will mean for the future. Towards the end of that clip, Clay mentioned something very important, and that is that an evidence-based approach using metrics, that's valuable. I advocate for that all the time. In fact, I just released an episode the other day where I specifically was advocating for a more evidence-based, metrics-based approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm a believer in that. But he points something out that is also important to realize, that data can only tell us about the past. It can't tell us about the future. It can show us trends from the past that we can assume might move forward into the future, but truly we can't know what that's going to mean for the future. But we can use evidence-based approaches and metrics to try to understand those trends, to develop meaningful theories about the future that we can use to guide our thinking, our strategic processes, and ultimately help us to face an uncertain future with more clear-eyed vision and the ability to address these disruptions that we see in the marketplace. I am really grateful for Clay Christensen for his many theories, his really great books. He passed away about a year and a half ago. I never met the man in person, but I've always considered him a mentor and a personal hero. He was such a humble man, even though he had such a huge impact in the world of business, both academically but also in the practitioner world of business. I think we'd all do well to check out his books, not just about disruptive innovation. He has many other great books. And ultimately, there's much we can learn from him and his wisdom. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. As always, I hope you can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day, and I hope you have a great week. We are excited about the launch of HCI's new magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine designed to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We will be publishing issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Check out the first issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.